Hi, good evening. Let's start the session. In case any of your video is on, I would request please switch it off, right? Just turn the video off. Okay. What we are doing is we are discussing the VS section countdown mock 6, right? That is what we are doing, right? So we'll go about it in the usual way, right? We'll start reading comprehension passages first, and then we'll come to the non-RC questions. Okay. Let's start with the first passage. This is the passage. Take 2 minutes, go through it. We then come to the questions. Okay, we'll then come to the questions. Okay, let's discuss the questions. Question 1 says we begin to see a new picture of the relationship between music and art. Right? We begin to see a new picture of the relationship between music and art. Right? So here we are essentially talking about the last sentence of the third paragraph, right? We begin to see a new picture of the relationship between music and art. Right? So with the references, which one of the following best captures the relationship between music and art mentioned? Right? Which one of the following best captures the relationship between music and art mentioned? Right? So let's do one thing. Let's go option by option here. The first one says the intentional act of a music form is to be heard. So music is art so long as it can serve that purpose effectively. Right? So here it says, so music is art. Right? Here it says, so music is art. But if you have a look at the next sentence, and it says music remains a musical form in the of this revision. And which revision? What was mentioned in the previous paragraph towards the end. Yet it is still not considered to be art. So in spite of being music, it is not considered to be art. which is why the first one is not likely to be the right answer. Because the first one says music is art, right? So option 1 cannot be the answer. Second says all music is an art, since one of the criteria of treating something as music is that it is created to be listened to. Right? This again is not what is being said. In fact, this is kind of opposite. Again, it says all music is art, which is directly contradicted by the example of Muzak that is given in the very next sentence in the same context. And it says music is that it is created to be listened to, right? Which again is kind of opposite of what is being said, right? Because what is being said is it's about hearing, not listening, right? Here it says not be listening, but hearing. So option 2 is also out. Option 3 says if a piece of music is created to pay attention, then that music is art, irrespective of how listeners treat their music. And again, we are talking of listeners over here. And it says if a piece of music is created to pay attention, then that music is art. This is not relevant to what is being discussed over here. We are talking about a new picture of the relationship between music and art based on the fact that music is heard and not listened to, right? Which is exactly what option 4 says, which is the answer. Option 4 says if we hear a piece of music but do not listen to it, right? So hearing and not listening, then it can still be treated as music, but it cannot be treated as art. This is exactly what it says, right? It remains a musical form, still not considered to be art. So option 4 is exactly what is meant in that sentence. Right? It captures the relationship between music and art correctly. Okay, question 2. Right? Question 2 says music is certainly not intended to be listened to, since anyone who paid attention to it will probably not get very work done at all. Which of the following best describes the logical consequence of the statement? What is the logical consequence of the statement? That anybody who paid attention to it would probably not get very much work done at all. Right? Question 2, the answer is option 3. Right? The same qualities which make music suitable for being heard also tend to render it incapable of rewarding attentive listening. Right? So it is meant to be heard. Right? It is meant to be heard, not listened attentively. Because if you listen attentively, right? If you pay attention to it, you will not probably get very much work done at all. And so if work is not getting done, then it is incapable of rewarding attentive listening. Right? So this is option 3 says, and this is what the statement was kind of implying. If we have a look at the other options, option 1 says even though music is meant not to be appreciated for its musical virtues, it may have additional functions beyond the utility that it serves. Which additional functions? We don't know that. This is primarily why option 1 is wrong. Option 2 talks about serving an aesthetic appeal, aesthetic value. This is out of scope. And there is no reference to aesthetic appeal or aesthetic value anywhere. And so this is out of scope. And option 4 says the soothing background that music provides serves no more purpose than aiding the productivity of the workers. Till here, it's okay. And till here, it's okay, where it talks about aiding the productivity, because even the passage talked about aiding the productivity. Right? Distractions are eliminated so they can concentrate. The problem with option 4 is where it says productivity of the workers intentionally listening to it. They are not supposed to listen to it, because when they listen, that means they're paying attention. Right? When you do something intentionally, that means you are doing it by giving attention. Right? So option 4 contradicts. Right? The last part of option 4 contradicts. The first part is okay, option 4, but the last part of option 4 contradicts. The answer is option 3 here. Question 3, each of the following can be inferred from the passage. Right? So the question is asking which of the following cannot be inferred. Right? Which of the following cannot be inferred? The answer is option 2. Option 2 says a piece of music which is created for a practical function can sometimes be considered a work of art. This is not indicated anywhere in the passage. Right? Please note, this is not something that is implied anywhere in the passage, that a piece of music which is created for a practical function, right, can sometimes be considered a work of art. Whereas let's have a look at the other options. Option 1 says it's possible to value or appreciate a piece of music works in virtue of qualities which we invent ourselves. This is an inference. Right? Why? Because I guess in the second paragraph, it says that when it comes to music, we tend to apply our own conceptions. Right? where it says arousal of personal associations, right? So we tend to apply our own personal associations. And so our own personal associations are those that we invent ourselves. So one is an inference. 3 says works of art are not always offered with the intention that they remind us of some events in the past. Absolutely an inference. This is exactly what the second paragraph is saying, right? Those associations are those that we invent ourselves, right? Those associations are those that we invent ourselves, right? Invent ourselves, right? Those are not why the art is offered. And that is not why the art is offered. That is done that we do, that is something that we do ourselves. Option 4 says sometimes the intentions of the music creator are not aligned with how the music is used by its listeners, right? How the music is used by its listeners. This is also absolutely an inference. And again, same paragraph. So options 1, 3, and 4 are inferences. The question asked us, which is not an inference. Right? I repeat, 1, 3, 4 are all inferences from the second paragraph. Right? Question 4, to use Fjord's Requiem as music is not to fail to treat it as music, though it is to fail to treat it as art. Is not support means that 3 of these will support. Okay, I'll just come back to the previous question, right? I'll just mention what the doubt is. And okay, I'll just let you unmute, right? I'll just finish discussing this question, then I'll come to the previous question. Okay. In this question, it says to use Fjord's Requiem as music is not to fail to treat it as music, though it is to fail to treat it as art, is not supported by which line? Which means that we are looking for an option that does not support it, maybe an option that contradicts it. Right? Maybe an option that contradicts it. The answer is option 4. The answer is option 4. Option 4 talks about one of the acts must amount to music being listened to. Right? Option 4 talks about being listened to. Whereas music is not something that is listened to. It is something that is heard. In fact, even if you have a look at the context, right? Even if you look at the context where it talks about Fjord's Requiem, and the context is about hearing, not listening, right? The context is hearing, it's not listening. So option 4 is saying exactly the opposite. Option 1 says artworks and works of music are offered with the intention that they have attention paid to them. Yes, artworks should have attention paid to them. That is why it is not art, right? That is why it fails to treat it as art, right? So this supports, right? Option 1 supports. The question is which of the following is not support, which of the following does not support, right? The statement is not supported by which other line. Option 2 talks about arousal of personal associations is not to use it as art, right? So again, if I'm not using it as art, right? I won't say this directly supports, but maybe this does not have much of an impact because here we are talking about arousal of personal associations, which may or may not be related with music. Right? But nonetheless, this is not something that goes against. Option 4 goes against. Option 3 says intentional acts need not be listening but hearing. This is exactly something that supports because in music, we are hearing, we are not listening. So if you are using Requiem as music, right? Fjord's Requiem as music, we are not listening, but we are hearing. And so option 3 also supports. Between options 2 and 4, 4 is the right answer because option 4 kind of goes against. Right? Option 4 goes against. Now, Jasmine, tell me what the doubt is in the previous question. I will unmute you.
So the thing is, you are saying second is not implied.
Correct. Just a second.
Now,
I'm sorry. Yeah. Yes.
now why I feel that it is implied? Because when they say that music is something, when it is heard, it becomes art is something that is heard. So when we hear music and then its purpose go down because it should not be heard. So I felt that a piece of music which is created for practical function, that is music, can sometimes be considered a work of art. Why? When it is heard by the factory person. So
Okay.
I felt that this statement is correct.
I'll just explain that. Where it talks about the concept of heard versus listening. Right? If you have a look at the second last paragraph where it talks about the concept of heard versus listening, it is not actually talking about the categorization from the perspective of art. It's talking about characterization from the perspective of music. Right? It says we find ourselves in the position of implying that not all art is music for so and so reasons. If we say instead that the intentional acts, and intentional acts need not be listening but hearing. Right? So hearing and listening is with reference to intentional acts. Right? If you go a bit earlier in the passage, it says that music is not art because it is not offered with the intention that it have attention paid to its features. So with reference to art, the criteria is attention paid to its, that is there in the first paragraph also. Right? So with reference to art, the concept is attention, but for the same reason, for which reason not offered with intention, but for this intention reason, it would follow that it is not music. So the concept of intention, the concept of listening and hearing is not for art. That concept is for music. Right? So that concept is for music. So when it says that music is heard, not listened, what it is arguing is that music is music. It's not art. That is why it says music, right? That is why it says music remains a musical form in the light of this revision. This revision
So
is
can you
hearing,
read
not
the
listening.
last line of the first paragraph? Music is certainly not intended to be listened to, since anyone who paid attention to it would probably not get very much of the work done at all. So I thought when they are saying that for this particular scenario, the music becomes an art because now it is getting the attention. Though it fails the purpose of music itself, but it makes it an art for that particular moment when it is getting the attention of the workers, which they should not give to music because they have to give attention to work.
Correct. So if they give attention to it, then the purpose is lost. That means if the purpose is to be retained, attention is not to be given to it. And if
Yes.
attention is not to be given to it, then it cannot be art.
Yes, exactly. So the second statement, can you come to the second statement of the question?
Yeah, then it cannot be art. This says can sometimes be considered a work of art. See, music is something that is not supposed to be paid attention to. Because if it is paid attention to, work will not get done.
Yes.
That means it is not to be paid attention to.
Yes.
But the first line says artworks are offered with intention that they have attention paid. So artworks require attention to be paid. In case of music, attention cannot be paid, which means that music is not artwork. Which is why it gets reformed in the last paragraph also. Music remains a musical form, but it is not considered to be art. Because the fundamental fact still remains that attention is not to be paid, which is exactly what happens in hearing. In hearing, we don't pay attention. In listening, we pay attention.
But we are giving attention at some time now.
No, but if we are giving attention, then it does not serve the purpose. That is wrong. If we are giving attention to music, then music does not serve the purpose. Purpose has to get served.
Okay.
The purpose has to get served. See, because what this says is a piece of music which is created for a practical purpose. So even if I consider the argument that sometimes we are paying attention, but what's happening when I pay attention, I don't get work done. So if I'm not getting work done, then it is not a practical function.
Okay. Okay.
That's why. So it will contradict with practical function, not getting work done.
Okay.
That's
Thank you.
Okay, Sambhav, I'll explain the fourth question once more. What the fourth question says is to use Fjord's Requiem as music. What is music? Music is something that is not listened to. It is heard, because if music is listened to, if attention is paid, right, then people cannot work. Listening and attention being paid are being used together in this passage. Right? In fact, that is the general distinction between hearing and listening. Listening is something that we do intentionally. Hearing is something that just happens by chance. Right? So this says to use Fjord's Requiem as music is not to fail to treat it as music. Right? Not to fail. Right? That means it is being treated as music. Why? Because in the second last paragraph, they have said that the criteria for music should be hearing. Right? And music is heard. It's not listened to. So if I use Requiem as music, then consider it to be music, though it is to fail to treat it as art. And but it will not be art. Art requires attention. If art requires attention, art requires listening, which music does not do. Right? Music requires only hearing. So we have been asked which of the following is, I'm sorry, the statement is not supported by which other line. So which other line does not support this? So now if I have a look at my options, option 1 says artworks are offered with the intention that they have attention paid to them. This completely supports, because if artworks require attention and music does not require attention, that means music is not art. And music is not art. So this supports. Option 3, intenders need not be listening but hearing. This also supports the fact that it is music. Right? It supports the fact that it is music because it says not to fail. That means treat it as music. So this also supports, because music does not require listening, music just requires hearing. Now, options 2 and 4. Option 2 says arousal of personal associations is not to use it as art. Right? Not to use it as art, and this talks about personal associations. This personal associations discussed, it's discussed in the second paragraph. But if we have a look at the second paragraph, the second paragraph is essentially about music in general. Right? It says that sometimes music is no more than music, but essentially the context is music. But if I were to associate it with music, right? If I were to associate music with music, then yes, it's not an art. So in that way, it will still support. Right? But I'm going to the extent of saying that it's not supporting. Right? To that extent, but even if we consider it indirectly, then it supports. Whereas look at option 4. One of the acts must amount to the music being listened to. So option 4 is saying that music must be listened to. Right? Where am I getting this from? It says somewhere over here. Yeah. If we say that one of the acts must be that music must amount to music being listened to. So if I'm saying that music must be listened to, we know that music is never listened to because we don't pay attention to music. So if music requires listening to, then music is not going to be music. But the statement says music is not to fail to treat it as music. The statement says that music should be treated as music. Right? Whereas option 4 will contradict it. Right? Option 4 contradicts the statement. Right? Option 2 could indirectly support, but even if we consider that option 2 not completely support, but option 4 contradicts. So option 4 has to be the right answer. It has to be the better answer. Right? That's why we go with option 4. Even option 2 by far-fetched association, it could support. Right? But even if it doesn't support, then option 4 is a better answer because option 4 contradicts. The basic crux of this passage is that music is to be heard, not listened to. And what is heard and not listened to can be categorized as music and not art. Art is something that requires attention. Right? And music, you cannot pay attention because then it will not serve its practical purpose. Okay. Take a couple of minutes, all of you, go through this passage. We'll discuss questions. Take 2 minutes, go through this passage. Okay, let's come to the questions. Right? Let's come to questions. I'll discuss the options. In case there's any point where you require clarification, please ask. Right? Or you don't agree with what I'm saying, please ask. Question 5, the proponents of economic pacifism promote each of the following except. Proponents are the supporters, right? The supporters of economic pacifism. This entire context is of economic pacifism, right? If you have a look at the first paragraph, that is what it discusses, right? And it gets discussed throughout. Promote each of the following except. So which of the following do they not promote? Right? Please note option 4, this is something that is promoted. And so option 4 cannot be the answer. This talks about fiscal discipline. And economic pacifism promotes fiscal discipline. Why? Because in the second paragraph it says war can also lead to lack of monetary discipline. So if war leads to lack of monetary discipline, those who are against war, that means that they are in favor of fiscal discipline. And so option 4 is promoted. Option 2, free fair trade. This is also something that is promoted. Right? This is also something that is promoted. I have support for free and fair trade from quite a few places. Right in the beginning, it talks about economic liberalism. Right? Then it talks about a lot of competition, and residing in the newly gained territories, now trade in competition. And then actually should have been there. And even later, it talks about an undue advantage being created for someone here, where it talks about creating a trade advantage for the paying nation. So if it creates an undue advantage for someone, then it is not fair trade. So if war creates undue advantage, right, then it is not fair trade. That means that economic pacifism promotes fair trade. The answer is option 3. Proponents of economic pacifism do not promote socialistic ideals. Right? I'm saying this purely on the basis of what's given in the third paragraph. So when I say that socialistic ideals are not promoted, I am saying that from the third paragraph, where it says the net effect of such expenditures is the crowding out of private capital investment and social expenditure. Right? So which expenditures? The expenditures that are in favor of war, or expenditures that arise because of war. So those expenditures that arise because of war promote socialism is what is mentioned. Economic pacifism is against war, right? So if war creates socialism, right? If war creates or is indirectly responsible for socialism, that means that economic pacifism is not in favor of socialism. Right? That is why option 3 is the answer. Right? Because we were asked, what does economic pacifism not promote? Right? So option 3 is the answer. Question 6. The proponent of economic pacifism believe that even if a nation won a war, it is still not advantageous for all of the following reasons except. Right? It is still not advantageous except. Let's do one thing. The language of this question is a bit complicated. So just to make it simple, let's analyze each and every option and see whether it agrees with the proponents of economic pacifism or not. Okay, Sambhav, what you're saying is economic pacifism is promoted according to passage. Then how is it correct? How is what correct? What is economic pacifism promoting as per the passage? No, economic pacifism is not promoting socialism. Let's have a look at that sentence again. Right? Let's have a look at that sentence again. It says the net effect of such expenditures. Right? The net effect of such expenditures. Which are these expenditures? These are expenditures which are military expenditures. Right? These are expenditures which are military expenditures. So indirectly, in a way, these are expenditures that are related to war, right? Indirectly, right? That is, they're related to military expenditures. So the net effect of such expenditures is that it promotes socialism. So what is promoting socialism? Right? If you look at the entire sentence, the net effect of such expenditures is the crowding out of private capital investment and social expenditure that then promotes. So what is promoting? Indirectly, it is these expenditures that are promoting. And what were these expenditures related to? They were related to war. So indirectly it is war that is promoting socialism, right? So what is promoting socialism? Indirectly, it is the concept of war and military expenditures. Now the question to ask yourself is economic pacifism in favor of war or is it against war? Economic pacifism is against war. The definition of pacifism, the very definition of pacifism is something that is anti-war, right? Pacifism means anti-war. So if indirectly war is in favor of socialism, that means that pacifism is against socialism, right? Pacifism is against socialism. Okay, Jaswin, what you're saying is the very first line of the passage, especially the words economic pacifism and economic liberalism, right? See, where it says economic pacifism, pacifism is basically the concept of, by itself, very basic definition of the term pacifism is something that is against war, right? Something that is against war. So here it says economic pacifism is based on classic liberal thought and is the purest representation of economic liberalism. Right? Economic liberalism is being talked over here. It is being linked to economic pacifism. Right? And throughout the context, right, war is something that is not being considered appropriate. Right? War is something that is not being considered appropriate. So economic pacifism does not consider war appropriate, which is why when it says that economic pacifism is the purest representation of economic liberalism, it means that economic liberalism is something that does not agree with the concept of war. Right? Economic liberalism is something that does not agree with the concept of war. Why? Because economic pacifism is the purest form of economic liberalism, and pacifism is against war. So that is what the first sentence is saying, and that is what gets supported throughout the passage. Right? That is what gets supported throughout the passage. Okay, let's have a look at question 6. The proponents of economic pacifism believe that even if a nation is at war, it is still not advantageous. So as I said, let's do one thing, one by one, let's have a look at these options. And let's see whether the proponent of economic pacifism would call it advantageous or not advantageous. Advantageous would be something that these people agree with. Not advantageous would be something that these people do not agree with. So in simple terms, if I have to evaluate the answer options, right, what I'm discussing right now is the strategy to solve such questions. Because the language that is used in the question statement, that language is kind of confusing. And so you kind of have to simplify the language to evaluate the answer options. And so let's go one by one. The resulting burden on public expenditure will undermine special economic interests. Right? Resulting burden on public expenditure will undermine special economic interests. Right? So I have to determine whether this statement supports economic pacifism or it does not support economic pacifism. Right? Let's do one thing. Let's keep option 1 aside for the time being. Let's have at the other options. Option 2 says any monetary gain from the war that will disrupt the domestic market negatively. This is something that economic pacifism supports. That is, whatever is gained from war, eventually it's going to disrupt the domestic market negatively. Why? Because it is talking about the prices rising, etc., etc. Option 3, the conflict disorganizes trade in such a way that it becomes unfair to some. This is also what it supports. How do I know that it becomes unfair to some? Because here it talks about creating a trade disadvantage for one of the sides. So if it creates a trade disadvantage for one of the sides, it becomes unfair to some. So this is also something that is supported. Any wealth, if at all accumulated as a consequence of war, will eventually be eroded. Right? This is also supported. Why? Because on the whole, the author is against war. So as a consequence of war will be eroded, the author would support that. When I say author, I'm talking about the proponents of economic pacifism. Option 1 says the resulting burden on public expenditure will undermine special economic interests. Right? The resulting burden on public expenditure will undermine special economic interests. Right? This is something that I cannot be 100% sure support. So now let's have a look at the question. It says, is still not advantageous. Right? The proponents of economic pacifism believe that even if a nation is on war, it is still not advantageous. have a look. Option 2 is still not advantageous. Why? Because it disrupts the domestic market negatively, right? So option 2 is still not advantageous. Becomes unfair to some, still not advantageous. Will eventually be eroded, still not advantageous, right? So options 2, 3, and 4 are giving me ways in which it will still not be advantageous, right? Nation winning a war. And nation winning a war not being advantageous is something that the author supports, right? Nation winning a war not being advantageous is something that the author supports. So all these three options, 2, 3, and 4 are not advantageous. Why? Because domestic market affected negatively, becomes unfair, eventually eroded. So 2, 3, 4 cannot be the answers because it's an except question. Right? The answer is option 1. Right? The answer is option 1. I'll justify option 1 in another way. Right? I'll justify option 1 in another way. See, this says nation winning a war is still not advantageous, except that means that the author thinks that this is advantageous. Right? The author thinks that this is advantageous, undermining special economic interests. Look at the last paragraph. In the last paragraph, the author says that an informed electorate will counter the influence of special economic interests. That means that proponents of pacifism are against special economic interests. So if they're against special economic interests, then for them it's advantageous. The question was still not advantageous, except, right? So the answer is option 1. Right? The answer option 1, this was a very complicated question because of the use of the language in the question. In case any of you has a doubt over here, please ask. I'll unmute any of you in case you have a doubt. But please ask if you're not convinced about the answer to this question. And please ask. It was a complicated question that had to be looked at from 2 aspects: advantages, not advantages, and what the author supports and what the author does not support. Okay. Question 7. Which one of the following a false opposes the arguments of economic pacifism except? Okay, in this question, right? Those of you who attempted this question, in this question, I don't think that the word except should be there. Right? I don't think that the word except should be there. This question says, which one of the following? Somehow, how is what inferred from the last paragraph? Okay, this part. Undermining special economic interests. See, what does the last paragraph say? Have a look at somewhere in between. If war and military expenditure are not beneficial, what explains their existence? The existence is explained by special interests that derive benefits from public expenditures on weaponry. Right? So the author has given a lot of reasons for war not happening. Right? So then the author is asking a question: if war is not beneficial, if war and military expenditure, and this is the link between military expenditure and war. If war and military expenditure are not beneficial, then what explains war and military expenditure? What explains war and military expenditure is interest. Right? So the justification why war and military expenditure exists is that there are special interests. Now the author is against war. If special interests are justifying war, in that case, the author is against those special interests. That means that the author does not want special interests. And that is why the author is saying that an informed electorate will counter the influence of the special interests. Right? So the author does not want special interests. So option 1, where it says undermine special interests, undermine means to weaken the special interests. Author anyways does not want special interests. So this is something that the author will consider advantageous. Right? This is something that the author will consider advantageous. Whereas the other 3 options, the author will support as they are non-advantageous. Right? Because there's something negatively unfair, eroded. Right? Question 7, the word except should not be there. Otherwise, the answer cannot get justified. And the word except should be there. Which one of the following a false opposes? I mentioned a lot of times that to make life simple while doing such questions, right? To make life simple while doing such questions, if false opposes, right? To make life simple, just make this if true supports, right? If true supports. This is something that will work in most of the cases. And we have seen that previous mocks also. This is something that will work in most of the cases. Because if you are going to negate each and every option and then see whether it opposes, it becomes very confusing, right? So the easier way to go about it is look for an option which, if true, supports, and which if true supports. In case you still are confused between two options, then negate them and see which opposes, right? But otherwise, life becomes simpler and it works in most of the questions. So let's see which one of the following, if true, supports the arguments of economic pacifism. Please note, arguments of economic pacifism are the main idea of the passage, right? So we are looking for an option that is supportive of the main idea of the passage, right? Question 7, the answer is option 4. We just discussed this. There are special interest lobbies. There are special interest lobbies that campaign for more military spending. And we just discussed this in the last paragraph. The last paragraph says that war and military expenditure still exists because of these special interests. And then it says that the special interests derive benefits from public expenditure on weaponry or acquisition of new territory. This is exactly what option 4 is saying. There are special interests that campaign for more military spending, maybe to show that national security is being improved. So option 4 agrees with what the author is saying. Let's have a look at the other options. Let's have a look at the other options. War is a tool that policy uses to achieve its objective. Please note this contradicts. Please note this contradicts the last sentence. The last sentence says war will cease to serve as a foreign policy tool. And war will not be a tool for policy. And war will not be a tool for policy. Here it says war is a tool. So this contradicts. Option 2, military forces help establish alliances with weaker countries to protect them from a military conflict. Not mentioned anywhere. Right? Not mentioned anywhere. This is out of scope. And this is out of scope. Option says the more the electorate is informed, the more they believe in the advantages. Contradicts. Right? Contradicts. So options 1, 2, and 3 do not support in any manner. Option 4 supports. Right? So in this question, the term except should not have been there. Right? And false opposes means true supports. Option 4 supports. Right? Option 4 supports. Please ask if there's a doubt. These are difficult passages. And these are difficult passages. The questions are difficult. They have very close answer options. Right? Or confusingly worded answer options. Question 8. The following sentences best describes what the passage is about. This I'll say is an easy question. And this I'll say is an easy question. The answer is option 3. The passage is about the problems of war. Right? The passage is about the problems of war. The passage has not discussed the benefits of peace. The passage is saying that there's a problem with war. The passage does not discuss the benefits of peace. Right? So option 2 cannot be the answer. Right? Option 2 cannot be the answer. Option 1 to show that the benefits of the loser in the war over that of the victor. This is a very small part. It cannot be the answer to a main idea question. Right? I'm not saying that the losers don't have benefits. It has been mentioned that sometimes the losers have benefits, but that is not the main idea. Option 4 to overcome the prejudices that prospect of peace from the minds of military leaders. This is definitely not the main idea. The main idea is how war is problematic. Right? What are the issues with war? Right? It was about pacifism. Pacifism is against war. Right? So the answer is option 3. Question 8 is an easy question. Question 9 would have been an easy question had the word except not been there. Right? And if we were able to relate that if false opposes could be looked at as if true supports. And this is a point that I have been saying over and over for the last few months when we have been discussing mocks. And please simplify the language. That is what I tried to do in question 6 also. Right? Question 5, this question I will again categorize as an easy question. Right? This again I'll categorize as an easy question. Try the next passage. Take 2 minutes. Right? Take 2 minutes. We'll then discuss the questions. Okay, let's discuss this. Question 9, it can be inferred from the passage that stigmergy in ants. And so what can we infer about the stigmergy in ants? Let's do one thing. Let's eliminate the options that are definitely not true. And let's eliminate the options that are definitely not true. It says option 2 cannot be the answer, because option 2 says stigmergy in ants is not as complex as found in human beings. This is not implied anywhere. This is not implied anywhere. What option 2 is saying is that stigmergy in ants is not as complex as found in human beings. So option 2 implies that human beings demonstrate a higher complexity of stigmergy. It is not implied. And that human beings display a higher degree of stigmergy. Option 4 says cannot be achieved without some prior planning. And with reference to stigmergy in ants, and option 4 is not valid. And with reference to stigmergy in ants, option 4 is not valid. Options 1 and 3 are close. Right? Options 1 and 3 are close. Because option 3 says is done without any conflict towards a shared interest. Without any conflict means, if I have to write it in other words, please always be very careful with double negatives. Right? Without any conflict means towards a shared interest. Right? So option 3 is essentially saying towards a shared interest, because without and conflict, right, those get cancelled out implication wise. So towards a shared interest. And option 1 says without any hierarchical structures. Now both of these are close options, right? Both of these are close options. The better option is option 3, right? I'll explain why. The better option is option 3, because option 3 says towards a shared interest. That is absolutely correct. Because if it was not towards a shared interest, they could not have achieved the goal. Right? So for achieving the goal, right? For achieving a goal, it has to be towards a shared interest. Now let me justify why option 1 is not appropriate. Right? I'll give you 2 reasons why option 1 is not appropriate. The first is that if you have a look at the first sentence, where it says without hierarchical supervision, please note it says supervision. Here it says structures. Right? Here it says structures. Right? So there's some difference. And I'm not saying they're completely different or they're opposites. That's not what I'm saying. Right? But there's a minor difference there. So that gives me one reason for preferring option 3. And that gives me one reason. I'll give you the other main reason for not going with the first option. Please note where it talks about without hierarchical supervision, right? That is with reference to constructing nests, right? That is only with reference to constructing nests. But if you have a look at where the concept of stigmergy has been discussed, and where it is defining the concept of stigmergy, and look at it, there is no reference to hierarchy anywhere. Right? There is no reference to hierarchy anywhere. So with reference to stigmergy in ants as a general concept, the concept of hierarchy is not discussed. Hierarchy was discussed or not being there with reference to those nests, not with reference to the concept of stigmergy in general. That is why option 3 is a better option. And I'm not saying option 1 is wrong, but option 3 is a better option. Again, not an easy question, maybe because option 1 was close. But those of you who had eliminated option 1, then it's a clear answer. Somehow in paragraph 2, you are saying it talks about non-hierarchical behavior. Just a minute. Paragraph 2, right? You are talking about paragraph 2. But paragraph 2 is not with reference to stigmergy in ants. This question is about stigmergy in ants. Here it talks about social insects. And here it talks about social insects. It's not about stigmergy in ants. Right? Because, see, I'll tell you what, if I want to go beyond the concept of ants, right? If I want to go beyond the concept of ants, look at the 4th paragraph. Look at the 4th paragraph. In the 4th paragraph, where we are talking about human building construction, the 4th paragraph implies that there is hierarchy. It talks about monitoring somewhere. Yeah, relies on actors monitoring the progress of work. Monitoring cannot happen without hierarchy. So in fact, the fourth paragraph implies that stigmergy in humans requires hierarchy. Right? Here it says without any hierarchical structures. Right? That is why it's not an inference. Because if I'm going to expand the concept of stigmergy beyond ants, hierarchy can be there. And fourth paragraph supports the fact that hierarchy can be there. And I think that's there in one of the other questions also. It's implied in one of the other questions also. And but the second paragraph is not about ants. The second paragraph is generalizing it to social insects. And stigmergy in ants was the first paragraph. Okay. Question 10, each of the following can be a component of stigmergy except. Option 4, easy question. Indirect coordination, yes, that is implied in the first paragraph. And indirect coordination. Why indirect coordination? Because they don't coordinate directly with each other. Right? They don't coordinate directly with each other, they indirectly communicate. So indirectly communicate is indirect coordination. So this is a component. Right? This is a component. Efficient collaboration, definitely. Otherwise, how would the task get completed? Self-organization, this is mentioned. Right? Self-organization is mentioned in the first paragraph somewhere here. Self-organization. Right? In the fifth line, self-organization is mentioned. There is no mention of individual awareness anywhere. Right? There's no mention of individual awareness anywhere. So question 10, it's a very simple question. And this is more or less a direct question. Question 11, all of the following is true about human building construction except, right? All of the following is true about human building construction except, and let's have a look at the options. Option 3, please note this is true. Right, I just discussed it. In the fourth paragraph, it implies that there is hierarchical supervision. Because if there is no hierarchical supervision, then who is doing the monitoring? Monitoring is always done by someone who is superior in hierarchy, right? Who comes up in hierarchy. And so option 3 is true in question 11. The work may not stick to what was originally planned. This is also true. And fourth paragraph, it says towards the end, changing plans according to these observations. Plans might need to be changed. So if plans are changed, that means they're not sticking to what was originally planned. Right? Option 2 is the answer. The stigmergy it follows is nearly identical to that of insects. And the stigmergy it follows is nearly identical to that of insects. Right? This is not true. Because it says perhaps the building industry could learn from the different ways that stigmergy is applied in insect colonies. Right? Which means that there is a lot to learn. If there is a lot to learn, it means it's not nearly identical. Because had it been nearly identical, there won't have been a lot to learn. Right? Again, easy question. And again, easy question. These are more or less direct questions. And these are more or less direct questions. Question 12. Out of the following sets of concepts, identify the set that is conceptually closest to the concerns of the passage. Whenever you have this kind of a question, right? Whenever you have this kind of a question, you could look at it from the perspective of being a main idea question, or you could look at it from the perspective of being a logical structure question. And both these question types you have discussed in class, right? Main idea questions and logical structure questions. If I look at it from the perspective of main idea question, right? I automatically will not be in favor of options 1 and 4. Right? I will not be in favor of options 1 and 4. Why? Because the main idea of this passage is stigmergy. Right? The main idea of this passage is stigmergy. Stigmergy does not find reference in options 1 and 4. Right? Ants is not the main idea. The main idea is stigmergy because we are moving beyond ants. Right? We are talking about a lot of cases. We are talking about building, we are talking about railways, etc. Right? Instance of railways, etc. Right? So ants is not the main idea. Moreover, please note in option 4, Wikipedia. Wikipedia does not support the main idea completely. In fact, Wikipedia does something different. In case of Wikipedia, it says that humans sometimes counteract. That's an important difference between ants and humans, that humans counteract. Where do they counteract? In the context of Wikipedia. Therefore, Wikipedia has editors who can intervene and remove undesired material. So Wikipedia is not something that favors stigmergy. Right? To a certain extent, yes, but it does not completely support stigmergy. So options 1 and 4 are not answers. And options 1 and 4 are not answers. Now, between options 2 and 3, right? Between options 2 and 3, option 2 is a better option. Both of them mention stigmergy, right? Both of them mention stigmergy, right? But where option 2 mentions open source softwares, counteraction. What is counteraction? What has been discussed in case of Wikipedia, right? And human building construction, right? This is closer to the main idea as compared to something like COPS. COPS was an example, right? And it was not even COPS that was an example. It was about the density of corpses, right? Aggregations of dead ants, right? So the concept, even the example was not corpse, the example was aggregation of dead ants, right? That is where option 3 goes wrong. But yes, please note one thing, right? But yes, please note one thing. When I say that option 2 is the answer, this should not be biometric, right? This should not be biometric potential. This should be biomimetic potential, right? This should be biomimetic potential. So when I say option 2 is correct, I'm assuming that this is biomimetic potential, right? Not biometric. There's a difference between biomimetic and biometric, right? What is biomimetic? Biomimetic is basically about synthetic methods which mimic biochemical processes, right? Which mimic biochemical processes. And so because of mimic, it says mimetic. And this mimic of biochemical processes, that is biomimetic, right? So option 2 is the answer, but the word should be biomimetic, not biometric, right? Not biometric, it should be biomimetic. That is why I did not eliminate option 1 because of biometric, and because that should be biomimetic. And so the answer is option 2, but it should be biomimetic. And so look at it from the context of being a main idea question or a logical structure question, right? Option 2 is a much better option than the third option, right? Much better option. This again, I will not say is an easy question, right? At least while attempting, biometric could have created a major confusion. At least for those of you who noticed that these are two different words, biometric and biomimetic, at least spelling wise, if nothing else, right? Okay. Let's come to the fourth passage. Take 2 minutes, read through the passage, we'll then discuss. Okay, let's discuss this. Each of the following is the consequence of dualism of mind and matter except. Right? We have a lot of except questions here. So which of the following is not a consequence? Right? Which of the following is not a consequence? The answer is option 2. Right? The answer is option 2. It enhanced empirical science as the dominant idea. that is definitely not valid as per the passage. Because if you have a look at the passage where it talks about dualism of mind, right? Where it talks about dualism of mind, it talks about an idea here, dualism of matter and mind, right? Not dualism of mind, dualism of matter and mind. And in this context, it talks about an idea being rescued from the advancing army of empirical science. Right? So it talks about empirical science being an advancing army, but something was rescued from it. Right? So I cannot say that it enhanced empirical science as the dominant idea. Right? The others are consequences. Right? Option 1, option 3, option 4. These are all implied in the passage. Right? These are all implied in the passage as a consequence of dualism of mind and matter. And option 2 is not implied. Please ask if there's a doubt with any of the options in this question. And in case you're not sure about any of the options in this question, please ask. Otherwise, we'll move on to the next one. On the whole, this was an easy question. This was not a difficult question. Right? Because nowhere does it say that empirical science is the dominant idea. Right? Nowhere does it say that. In fact, it kind of says something different. Okay. Question 14, which one of the following best describes the author's attitude? Right? Author's attitude, please note, is a tone question. Right? Author's attitude is a tone question. That is the first thing that should strike you. Towards the use of psychopharmacology in the treatment of mental disorders. Right? So the question is indirectly, what is the author's tone towards psychopharmacology in the treatment of mental disorders? Right? Question 14. The answer is option 3. Concerned that such a treatment can misconstrue mental disorders. And it can misconstrue mental disorders. And the author is concerned. The tone is the author is concerned. Where am I getting this from? Misconstrue mental disorders? Here. Where it says these dysfunctions are either to be cured by psychopharmacology or remedied by therapy meant to lead the patient to rediscover objective truth, to conceive of it in this way. In this way. Right? The reference is to what is given in the previous sentence is not only simplistic but highly biased. Right? Is highly biased. Right? So if it is biased, then maybe it misconstrues mental disorders. Options 1, 2, and 4. Right? Options 1, 2, and 4. Let's have a look at them. Option 1 says appalled. Appalled means shocked. Right? Appalled means shocked. Shocked is a very extreme term. The author is not shocked. The author is concerned that something right is not happening. Moreover, the author has not called psychopharmacology a debunked or an ineffective theory. The author has not called it debunked. The author has not called it ineffective. Right? So option 1 is not correct, either from the perspective of the fact that has been mentioned or from the perspective of tone. Option 2 says confident. Please note this directly should have been eliminated because confident is a positive word. Right? Confident is a positive word. But even apart from that, right? Even if you don't eliminate it because of confident, right? Because of what could come later. Right? Let's see, it says confident that the use of treatment circumvents the problem of dualism. Please note, this is kind of opposite of what the author is saying. Circumventing the problem. Circumventing the problem means avoiding the problem. Option 2 says he's confident that this treatment avoids the problem. Right? That is kind of contradictory. And the author is concerned. He's not happy about something. He's not confident about something. Right? The author is concerned. Right? He's not happy about something. Option 4 says alarmed that an irrational treatment got widespread acceptance. He is not calling it irrational. And he's not calling it irrational. And between irrational and misconstrue. Misconstrue is a much milder word that the author would agree with. And he's concerned. He's not alarmed as such. And he's concerned. So options 3 and 4 would have been close options. But option 3 is a much better option than option 4 is. Right? Question 15, longish question. Please, my suggestion is if you come across such a question and where you have something very long given, chances are that because it's long, right? Chances are that because it's long and time consuming, conceptually it might be an easy question. And conceptually it might be an easy question. Here it's a very long sentence that has been given. Then the sentence is from the passage, so there's no new information in the long sentence. When I said long, with reference to the answer options. And which one of the following is the most accurate interpretation of these sentences? The answer is option 4. Prior to the notion of dualism. Prior to the notion. Why? Because it says in the previous episteme. Right? What is episteme? Episteme is basically a system of understanding something. Right? So in the previous episteme, right? Previous to what? Previous to the notion of dualism. Dualism is one way of understanding things. Right? So in the previous episteme, irrational experiences were treated as part of nature. Right? Where it says, before the bifurcation of mind and nature, irrational experiences were not just error. Right? They were speaking a language as meaningful as rational experiences. Look at this part. Speaking a language as meaningful as rational experiences. That is exactly what it says over here. Thereby providing betterment to any suffering. Where do I get this from? Providing betterment to any suffering? The word amelioration. At this stage, when you have approximately 2 months left for the exam, and at this stage, when you have around 2 months left for the exam, it is expected that you know what the word amelioration means. Right? Amelioration basically means to better something, right? To reduce the intensity of something. And something is bettered because the intensity is reduced. So amelioration of suffering means betterment of any suffering. And option 4 is a clear answer. There is no other option that is close. Right? There is no other option that is close. Right? This I will categorize as an easy question, because the only challenge that could have been faced in this question is the meaning of the word amelioration, which, as I said, is kind of expected at this stage. Right? The other options, option 1 says treated as rational experiences. That is what I guess another option says, treated as rational experiences. This is not what is said. What is said is a language as meaningful as rational experiences. So they are not treated as rational experiences. And option 2, look at option 2. Option 2 talks about bifurcation of mind and nature. This is irrelevant to the sentence. Sentence is about the previous episteme. That is what happened before mind and nature, right? The dualism. Right? So option 2 is irrelevant. The answer is option 4. Question 16, main idea question. Right? Which of the following best describes what the passage is about? Right? It's a main idea question. The answer over here is option 2. Highlighting a negative consequence of the 17th century philosophical theory. Which is the 17th century philosophical theory? Dualism of mind and matter. Right? Dualism of mind and matter. To the current Western understanding of disorders. Yes, this passage is talking about disorders. And it talks about a negative consequence. That is why the author was concerned. Right? That is why the author was concerned. So the tone will all or should tie in with the main idea. Right? So highlighting a negative consequence of that theory to the current Western understanding of disorders. Why Western understanding? Because that is what it says. In the West are still very much the children of the disenchanted bifurcation. Which bifurcation? Matter and mind. Right? If you have a look at the other options, option 1, please note, could be an interpretation. Option 1 could be something that I think is true, explaining the need for a revision, which is no longer applicable. And so this is my interpretation. The author has not said that there should be a revision, because the author does not agree with something. But when I don't agree with something, it does not mean that there should be a revision. For all I know, I can discard it. So even without revising it, if I discard it, maybe the author is fine with it. So revision can be the reader's interpretation. The author has not said it. Main idea is always from the author's perspective, right? It is always the author's main idea. Option 3 says, arguing that the blind application of 17th century ideas into modern consciousness can create a distorted understanding of current issues. Please note, what current issues? We are talking about disorders. And so option 3 cannot be the answer, because the main idea cannot generalize what has been discussed. Option 4, describing the evolution of a 17th century philosophical notion and how that notion has been applied in the context of mental disorders. Right? Option 4 is not wrong. Please note, option 2 is better because it says negative consequence. Option 4 does not imply negativity anywhere. That is why option 2 is a better option. On the whole, as far as main idea questions go, this was an easy question. And as far as main idea questions go, again, this categorization of easy and difficult that I'm doing, and I've said this in all our classes on mocks, this categorization of easy and difficult that I'm doing, I'm taking into consideration the stage of preparation that we are currently in, and a majority of you. And the state of preparation, the stage of preparation, and more than state, stage of preparation. And I repeat, more than state, stage of preparation that you are in. It is from that perspective that I'm categorizing easy and difficult. Okay. Let's come to question 17. Right? We are done with the RCs. We'll again come back to the RCs when I discuss strategy towards the end. Right? Let's have a look at the non-RC questions. Parajumbles. In this question, please note 3-2 is a mandatory pair. Right? This is a mandatory pair. When empath first entered the English lexicon, it was anything but a compliment. Right? So empath was not a compliment. This is a point that is being made. Please note who is the reason. Why was it not a compliment? Because it was first coined in a science fiction story about unnaturally empathetic beings that are used to exploit workers. Right? So unnatural exploiting workers, that is why it was not a compliment. Right? And it talks about entering the English lexicon, it talks about coined. Right? Exactly the same context. There is no doubt that 3-2 should be a mandatory pair. Right? After which comes statement 1. Why? It says the word has since taken on more positive connotations. Please note the usage of the word since. This is a term that implies a chronology. Because when I say since, it has to be since a particular point in time. What is that point in time? When it first entered the English lexicon, when it was coined. So effectively, 3, 2, and 1 should go together because of chronology. Right? Because of chronology. Right? I hope all of you understood the chronology. First entered is the same as coined. And this is talking about a point in time when it first entered. And since taken. So the minute you read the word since taken, the first thing that should come to your mind is since when. Right? So you relate it to statements 3 and 2. So 3 to 1 come together. Please note 1 and 4 is a mandatory pair for the simple reason that 4 gives a reason for 1. 1 says might even be worth putting on your resume as a mark of leadership. Why? Because some argue that leaders should exhibit more empathy to help burned out workers after the worst of COVID-19. So option 1 is statement 4 is a justification for statement 1. Right? All in all, a simple parajumble question. Right? A simple parajumble question where the basic concepts that we have discussed in class and the basic concepts will help you arrive at the answer. And there was nothing even confusing amongst the different possibilities. Right? So question 17, easy question. Question 19, again, parajumbles. I won't say this is an easy question, primarily because the context is kind of abstract. The context is abstract, the sentences are long. Right? So I won't say this is an easy question, but I'll say it's a doable question. Right? Let's see how. Statement 3 says Beck's strong cosmopolitan turn and his argument for methodological cosmopolitanism. It talks about a concept over here. It talks about a kind of cosmopolitanism. Please note, it is that same concept that is discussed in statement 2, methodologically cosmopolitan. Please note statement 3 mentions the concept of methodological cosmopolitanism, right? Option 3 mentions it. Statement 2 elaborates it. Right? Which is why 3-2 should become a mandatory pair. The context is exactly the same. Please note statement 3 is just mentioning it. Statement 2 is discussing it. Right? Statement 2 is discussing it. Now, so 3 and 2 should come together. Right? Okay. Another thing I wanted to notice is that in statement 1, the word these is a demonstrative adjective. And these is a demonstrative adjective. So the first thing that should come to mind when you read these processes is which processes? Which processes? There are two sentences with the terms processes. One is statement 2 and one is statement 4. Statement 4 also talks about processes. But if you understand the context, these processes are about or related to cosmopolitanism, right? Or methodological cosmopolitanism. That is what the processes are related to, which is why one cannot come with two, because in two, the processes are local processes. Right? The processes are local processes. So it cannot be 2-1, it has to be 4-1. Right? It has to be 4-1. So the mandatory pair is 4-1. So now the doubt that you can have is it 3-2-4-1 or is it 4-1-3-2? But please note, 4 is not likely to be the first sentence because it says in this way, this is again a demonstrative adjective. And ideally it requires something before it. So the sequence is 3-2-4-1. Right? The sequence is 3-2-4-1. I won't say it's an easy question, but it was a doable question. Right? It was a doable question. There were clear hints about what the links should be. Right? But on the whole, again, let me not call it an easy question. Right? Question 19, summary question. Right? Question 19, summary question. Take a few moments, just read the paragraph once. Right? I'll then explain the answer options. Right? Read the paragraph once. Okay, let's have a look. Option 1, it's puzzling to see an increase in vaccine skepticism among more educated parents, since education would have inculcated trust in other areas of scientific products than vaccines. See, this is completely wrong. The last part says trust in science, scientific products like vaccines. This is other areas of scientific products than vaccines. So option 1 is wrong, right? Apart from anything else. And we require a reason to mark it wrong, right? Option 1 is wrong. Option 2 says educated parents should not be against vaccination, since vaccination is the product of trusted science and modern institutions which employ significant resources to develop these vaccines. There's no reference to this. Right? There's no reference to this. Employ significant resources to develop these vaccines. Right? Let alone it being the reason, there's no reference to it. The answer is option 3. There are reasons beyond religious motivation. Right? So religious motivations do not underlie. Somehow I'll do that. I'll go back to the first option. Right? Let's have a look at the third option first. Right? I'll go back to the first option. Right? There are reasons beyond religious motivation that is supported here. Religious motivations do not underlie. Lack of familiarity with science because of their familiarity. Economic privilege, greater resources. That may explain the rising vaccine skepticism among more educated parents. This is 100% correct as per what the passage says. Right? This is 100% correct. Okay. What I was saying about the first option was it is puzzling to see an increase in vaccine skepticism among more educated parents, since education would have inculcated trusts in other areas of science products than vaccines. When it says other areas of scientific products than vaccines, it means except vaccines. Scientific products except vaccines. But here it says scientific products like vaccines. Right? They're generally expected to have more trust in science and more trust in scientific products like vaccines. Here it says inculcated trust in other areas of scientific products than vaccines. That means except vaccines. Right? That is the main reason why this is wrong. Even apart from that, option 1 will contradict the first sentence. The first sentence says the rising vaccine skepticism is puzzling for several reasons. Option 1 gives you just one reason. right? Option 1 gives you just one reason. So option 1 definitely cannot be the answer because it goes against the main idea, which is where option 3 is correct. It gives us several reasons which are not being applied. Familiarity with science, economic privilege, religious motivation, etc., etc. And so option 3 agrees with the first sentence, puzzling for several reasons. Option 4 says there are many reasons for the instances of vaccine skepticism among more educated parents, and some of these may be linked to their secularistic ideas and attitudes towards science. Right? This is completely wrong. Right? This is completely wrong. This completely goes against the passage. Right? This completely goes against the passage. Right? Especially the fact that it does not justify that there is something puzzling happening. Option 4 says there are many reasons. So when I say there are many reasons, it means it's justified. The passage was not saying it's justified. The passage was saying it's puzzling. So option 4 contradicts the main idea. Please note again, not a difficult question. Not a difficult question. Summary questions can be made very difficult. Right? Summary questions can be made very difficult. Right? Why I am saying this is not difficult is because the context of the paragraph was not abstract. You can come across paragraphs that have 6 or 7 sentences dealing with a very abstract concept of philosophy. Believe me, it becomes very, very difficult sometimes. This was not at all difficult. Question 20. Parajumbles. Right? Parajumbles. Question 20. In this question, 2, 4 is a very clear mandatory pair. Why? Because 2 says they expended great energy responding to the question and their answer. Right? I hope even those of you who got the question wrong, right, who got the answer wrong, I just hope you formed mandatory pair 2, 4. And there is no justification for not noticing that 2, 4 is a mandatory pair. Right? Question and answer. What was the answer? Their answer was a qualified yes, advocating a formula of passionate commitment and impassive stoicism. In retrospect, right? In retrospect to what? Right? When it says in retrospect, we are talking about it with reference to this answer that was a qualified yes. It says it was an anecdote. What was an anecdote? What has been discussed in 2 and 4. Tinged with desperation, because in an absurd world, there are absolutely no guidelines. And so here it says in retrospect, it was something that was tinged with desperation because there are no guidelines. So if there are no guidelines, then the answer cannot be yes. Yeah, what was the answer to whether surviving is possible? The question was whether surviving is possible. So if I'm saying that the answer is yes, that means surviving is possible. That means that there have to be some guidelines for survival, right? But this is there are no guidelines. And then so 4 and 3 come together because this retrospect will go with 4. And then please note statement 1 says passionate commitment is meaningless. Where is passionate commitment given? It is given over here in 4. Now you might have a doubt that if both 4 and 1 are talking about passionate commitment, why can't I take 4 and 1 together? The reason is very simple. That statement 4 is in favor of passionate commitment. Statement 1 is against passionate commitment. So for 4 and 1 to be a mandatory pair, please note there has to be a contrast indicator. There has to be a term like but, however, though. That is why 4-1 cannot be a mandatory pair. And that contrast term I got in statement 3, which said in retrospect. And so that was the contrast term that I got. Right? So that is why 1 will make sense after 3. Right? 1 will make sense after 3. So the sequence is 2, 4, 3, 1. Not a difficult question, but again, let me not call it a simple question. This is where the context was abstract. Right? The context was kind of abstract. Right? But this was definitely a doable question. Right? Definitely a doable question. Let's come to question 21. Right? Let's come to question 21. Now, those of you who attempted this question, right? Question 21, in my opinion, the only way to arrive at the right answer is by elimination. Right? Is by elimination, but even by elimination, I would say that there are 2 options that are very close. Right? There are 2 options that are very close, even by elimination. I will approach this question only by elimination because justifying the answer through relevance kind is difficult, in my opinion. Right? So let's have a look at through elimination. Option 4 is eliminated because it says those quotes were meant for fiction and non-fiction works. Right? This is out of context. Nowhere has fiction, non-fiction been discussed. Right? This is out of context. So option 4 is out. Option 2 contradicts. Right? Option 2 contradicts. Option 2, sometimes unconnected quotes can bring forth a compelling idea. So option 2 is saying that unconnected quotes can have a positive consequence, bringing forth a compelling idea, proving or establishing a compelling idea that's positive. But please note, where it talks about unconnected, it says that it is a problem. Negative, option 2 says compelling idea positive. Right? So option 2 is contradictory. So now the choice is between options 1 and 3. Right? The choice is between options 1 and 3. In options 1 and 3, one major difference that you will notice is that option 1 says that the disconnected quotes were because he said them in different contexts. And option 3 says that the quotes were wrongly attributed to Mark Twain. So option 3 says that the quotes were not of Mark Twain. Whereas option 1 says he said that in different contexts. Please note, option 3 is not likely to be correct, because look at the language of the second last sentence. The language says the problem is that Twain never really said that. The second last sentence, had it said that Twain never said that, right? I repeat, had the second last sentence been, just notice the difference. Had the second last sentence been Twain never said that, then I can say that they are wrongly attributed to Twain. But when it says he never really said that, what means that maybe it was not his implication. And maybe it was not his implication that is being derived, which is why option 1 is a better option. I have arrived at option 1 through elimination, right? I have arrived at option 1 through elimination by justifying only the last part, right? I repeat, I have arrived at it through elimination by just justifying the last part. And by elimination, I get option 1. But options 2 and 4 were very easy to eliminate. Again, let me not call this an easy question. Take a few moments, just rush through what's given over here. Right? Just rush through what's given over here. We'll then discuss. Okay. Let's have a look at the answer options. Let's have a look at the answer options. Again, categorization wise, this question I will call easy. In terms of summary questions, this is an easy question. The only thing is that certain basic fundamentals of summary should be clear. And so I'll explain how those concepts come in helpful while eliminating the answer options. Right? In case you have a doubt anywhere, please ask, because I'm explaining certain concepts also over here while discussing this answer. Option 1 says, gender fair language reduces gender stereotyping and discrimination. Please note, this is distortion of information. Why? Because the first sentence says gender fair language aims at reducing. Right? So there's a basic difference between reduces and aims at reducing. Because what it aims, it may not have achieved. And what it aims, it may not have achieved. So I will eliminate this option right here. Only in case I do not find any other relevant option will I come back to this option. But for me, this option is out because right in the beginning, it distorted the information. And please be very careful with options that distort the language. Right? So when you see reduces, just check whether it matches. It does not match. Right? It does not match. Now, options 2, 3, and 4. These are close options. Right? Options 2, 3, and 4 are close options. Just note that options 2, 3, and 4 do not make the mistake that option 1 is making. Because option 2 says one way of eliminating gender stereotyping and discrimination. And it says one way, but again, to a certain extent, it kind of says is using gender fair languages. And so even though it is not as wrong as the first option, right? But again, it says is using gender fair languages. And so I'll be very careful before marking option 2. Right? Because again, it's saying that one way is to use gender fair languages. So it's establishing that fact. Right? So let's leave option 2 as well. And the mistake is not as glaring as in the first option, but yes, there is still a difference with what the paragraph said. Look at option 4. Option 4 does not have that mistake. Option 4 says even though past research suggests that gender language has the potential. Having potential does not mean that it's achieved or not. It has the potential, which is what here also it says, it has the potential. And so option 4 is okay. Now, one thing that I want you to notice is, and this will apply to quite a few questions, is that options 2 and 4 are talking about what past research indicates. Please note options 2 and 4 are talking about what past research indicates. Option 3 is not talking about that. We have discussed that generally paragraphs follow a prep format, right? What is prep? Point comes first, right? The support comes later. Point comes first, support comes later. What came first? Gender fair language aims at reducing gender stereotyping. Please note the first sentence did not talk about past research. What does that tell me? That the main idea was not past research. The main idea was gender fair language, and past research has been discussed to support the idea. And summary agrees with the main idea. For me, this is sufficient to arrive at option 3. Right? For me, this is sufficient to arrive at option 3. Because research has been given to support the main idea. Main idea is that gender fair language, which could use neutralization or feminization, may positively reduce. Why may positively reduce? Because it aims. And it has potential, but basically because it aims. It might not achieve it, but at least it may happen. There's another very major reason why option 3 is the answer, because option 3 also talks about an important aspect of well-informed discussions, right? Which is mentioned over here. Right? Which is mentioned over here. In summary questions, important parts are not to be left out. And important parts are not to be left out. And so yes, it is supporting information, but that supporting information should also be there. The only thing is supporting information should not be at the expense of the idea. That was the issue that I had with options 2 and 4. Right? Supporting information should not be at the expense of main idea. So the main idea is already there in option 3, but the supporting information also gets mentioned. Right? Because in a summary question, apart from the main idea, right, the idea is important, but in a summary question, all the important points should come. So in this paragraph, there are quite a few important points. One is that aim, the other is about neutralization and feminization. The third is about something that is done consistently over a longer period. And the fourth is about well-informed discussion and controversies. So in a summary question, all the main points should come. The main idea should be there, but all the main points should also come. So option 3 is the only option where all the main points are coming. And I hope all of you got the explanation that I gave for past research. And that makes options 2 and 4 less appropriate as compared to option 3. Right? I'm not saying that this past research is making it wrong. Right? That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, but it's making it less appropriate as compared to 3. Right? So this is question 22. I'll call this an easy question if the fundamentals of summary are in place. Right? This is an easy question. Question 23, odd sentence question. Right? Question 23, odd sentence question. In this question, the odd sentence is the second statement. Because statements 1 and 3, you will notice they form a mandatory pair. Right? Statements 1 and 3, they form a mandatory pair. Why do they form a mandatory pair? Because the word statement 3 uses the word, and so statement 3 is associating it with some other statement. And statement 1 has an instance that has been given. So 1, 3 is a mandatory pair, so 1, 3 cannot be the answers. And what is 3 talking about? It is talking about a free society. 4 talks about the same concept, basic freedom, right? In fact, even if you have a look at the fifth option also talks about liberating their own minds from apathy and fear. And liberating, freeing, the concept is the same. So even if I do not establish the sequence, and as I've always said, there are two ways to attend this question, such questions, odd sentence questions. Either establish a sequence or select out of context. Out of context is always easier. Why? Because establishing a sequence takes time. Option 2 is out of context. Why? Because option 2 talks about the effort necessary to remain uncorrupted. Right? So the focus of option 2 is on remaining uncorrupted. The focus of option 2 is not on freedom. Whereas 1 and 2 were related, 1 and 3 were related. 3 is about freedom, 4 is about freedom, 5 is about liberation. And so option 2 is out of context. So it is not by sequence that I'm justifying the answer. I'm justifying it by an easier technique, which is out of context. Right? But again, I would say medium difficulty level. Right? Medium difficulty level. But it was a dual question. Question 24. This is an easy question. Right? This is an easy question. Option 2 is a clear answer here. Option 2 talks about natural selection. Right? Option 2 talks about natural selection. None of the other answer options are about natural selection. All the other answer options are about drift. 1 is about drift. 3 is about drift. 4 is about the genesis of the idea. Which idea? Drift. And why am I relating it to drift? Because this says genesis. Right? And statement 3 talks about claimed to have developed. So the person who develops is the person who's responsible for the genesis. And the meaning of genesis should be clear for this. Right? And again, 5 is about drift. So 1, 3, 4, 5 are very clearly about drift. Option 2 has got nothing to do with drift. Right? So a very simple question. So this is about the questions in the sheet. Right? This is about the questions in the sheet. If you have a doubt with any of the questions, please ask. I'll spend 5 minutes discussing this from a strategy perspective. Again, this strategy perspective will be considering that you have 2 months left for the exam. And you have close to 2 months for the exam, right? This is September, right? So November, you have around 2 months left for the exam. So the strategy that I discussed is from that perspective. Let's have a look at the non-RC questions. Right? Non-RC questions 1, 2, second easy question, 3, 4. Right? Non-RC questions 1, 2, 3, 4. So 4 easy questions in non-RCs. Right? Non-RC questions, 4 easy questions, and these definitely were easy questions. And these definitely were easy questions. Okay, let's have a look at the RCs then. The fourth passage, the one that talked about the dualism, right? The one that about the dualism, there were 3 questions that I categorized as easy, right? 3 questions. So passage 4, the dualism passage, right? 3 easy. Then let's talk about passage 3. Passage 3, if I'm not wrong, is the Stigmergy passage. Yes. Stigmergy passage, 2 easy questions. Stigmergy passage, 2 easy questions. Then passage 2. Passage 2, one about pacifism. And it's about pacifism, 2 easy questions. economic pacifism. Right? 2 easy questions. And the first passage, if I'm not wrong, I had not categorized easy, difficult. Right? I had not categorized difficult. This was not easy. Each of the following can be inferred. This is maybe one question that I would call easy. No, this one, sorry. This was the easy question. And this was the easy question. This again was kind of confusing. And so passage 1, that was about music and art. And passage 1, that was about music and art. And one easy question. Right? One easy question. So if I consider the same strategy that we have discussed in our earlier mocks, right? If I consider the same strategy that we have discussed in our earlier mocks, where we talked about attempting 3 passages out of 4, right? 3 passages out of 4. That is where we talked about not attempting each and every passage, but where passage selection plays an important role. Now, in this particular case, right? In this particular case, maybe I definitely would have done the passage on stigmergy. Right? Maybe I definitely would have done the passage on stigmergy. Why? Because the context of the passage was factual. Right? The context of the passage was factual. But other than identifying the passage on stigmergy as being the one that should have been done, apart from that, in maybe 30-45 seconds, it would have been difficult to choose one out of these other 3 not to do. Because all the other 3, dualism, pacifism, music, art, they were not factual passages as such. So maybe I could not have decided which one of them not to do. Right? So let's take a worst case scenario. Right? Let's take you, right? Where this one is done, this one is done, and this one is also done. Right? What would be even bad? What would be even bad if this dualism passage was missed out? Because it had 3 easy questions. Right? That would be really bad if this dualism passage was missed out. Right? So let's take a scenario where passage 4, passage 3, and passage 1 are done. Right? So there are, in these 3 passages, there are 6 easy questions. Right? In these 3 passages, there are 6 easy questions. So let's say that you get only 5 out of these 6 easy questions correct. Right? You get only 5 out of the 6. I'm taking a very conservative scenario, right? I'm taking a bad case scenario, right? That you get only 5 out of 6 easy questions correct, and all the questions that I have categorized as non-easy. Right? The categorization, as I've discussed, was between easy and not easy. Right? And all these, let's say, you get wrong. So there are 3 passages that you have attempted, 12 questions out of which 5 you got correct. Right? 6 not easy you got wrong, and 1 you got wrong over here. So basically 5 correct. So 5 into 3 is 15, and 7 wrong is 15 minus 7, that is 8 marks. Right? That is 8 marks. This is a very bad case scenario that I'm considering, where you are doing 12 questions, you are getting only 5 questions correct, and you are attempting all the other questions which you are getting wrong. So there is a negative marking that's taking place. So 5 into 3, 15 minus the 7 that you got wrong. So 8 marks in the RCs. And this is a very bad case scenario that I'm taking. This is not the ideal or what I'm recommending. And this is a very bad case scenario that I'm taking. So let's say you get 8 marks in the RCs. When it comes to the non-RC questions, if you have a basic idea that RCs has not gone well, and which you should have, right? If you think that you will be getting in the range of 8 or 10 marks in RCs, then these easy questions you should be focusing on more. And when I say focusing on more, what I mean is that the likelihood of getting these questions should be higher. So even if I consider that you get these 4 easy questions correct, right? Even if I consider that you get these 4 easy questions correct and you get all the others wrong, you still have 12 marks here. 4 into 3, 12 marks here, right? 12 and 8. So even in a very bad case scenario, I'm looking at something like 20. And even in a very bad case scenario, let's do one thing. Let's cut this down even further. Let's talk about a score of around 17 to 18. right? Let's talk about a score of 17 to 18. Where 8 is just RCs and maybe another 10 is from the non-RC questions, and or some permutation combination. Even 18 in this paper, if you have a look at the percent distribution, it's an 80 percentile. In this paper, if you have a look at the percentile distribution for English, 18 is an 80 percentile. So even considering a not good performance, right? Even considering a not good performance, 80 percentile was definitely manageable, right? Definitely manageable. Now let's take a scenario which is slightly better than this. Right? This I would say is a bad case scenario. Now let's take a scenario which is slightly better than this. And when I say bad case scenario, because it could have been better, right? So let's take a better case scenario. In the better case scenario, let me say that I get these 6 easy questions correct. Right? I get these easy questions correct. So how much does that give me? 6 easy questions correct. This gives me 18 marks. And let me still say that I get these 6 difficult questions wrong. So 18 minus 6. And 18 minus 6 is 12. Right? 18 is 12. Right? Or did I make a mistake somewhere? 6 correct questions give me 18. 6 wrong questions give me minus 6. That is 12. And so 18 minus 6 is 12. So 12, yeah, correct. 12 in reading comprehension. 4 more than the earlier scenario, right? 3 plus 1. Right? So 12 in the reading comprehension. And considering that this is a better case scenario, I get all these 4 correct. Right? I get all these 4 correct. So 12 plus 12, that is 24. A score of 24 in this exam is close to a 92 percentile for this particular mock as per the percentile distribution today. Right? 24 is a 92 percentile. So achieving somewhere close to a 90-92 percentile was not very difficult over here. Right? Not very difficult over here. Achieving a 90 to 92 percentile. Right? It was not very difficult. Right? Even with just 6 questions correct in RCs. Right? Even with just 6 out of 16 questions correct in RCs and half of the non-RC questions correct, still a 90-92 percentile was achievable. Right? Anything more than this would have taken you beyond, right? That is beyond maybe 93, 94, 95, or even 98 percentile. Anything better than this, right? Depending upon how many you got correct, it could have been 94, 95, 96, 97, 98, or even 99 percentile. But again, the 2 scenarios that we generally discuss in all our mocks, right? One is the bad case scenario, the other is the slightly better case scenario, right? So a bad case scenario still 75 to 80 percentile, and a better case scenario 92 percentile, and a very good case scenario, as I said, could be anywhere 94 to 99 percentile or even 100 percentile depending upon how many you get correct. So this is the analysis for this particular mock, right? The fact that all of you have taken the mock and have attended this session, right? Whether it's this session or any analysis session of the mock, right? I would say that is commendable. And the only thing is, please continue with this. Even if you have scored very well in English, right? So let's say, even if you have a score of around 40 percentile or a 50% or 60 percentile in English, and just keep in mind one thing, 2 months is still quite a bit of time. Right? 2 months is still quite a bit of time. Focused efforts, dedicated efforts, and consistent practice, right? And consistent practice, right? There should be an improvement in score, right? So with all of these, right, there should be an improvement in score. The chances of an improvement in score are high. Right? So please do not get disappointed or discouraged as such, even if you have a 40 percentile or 50 percentile. And there have been lots of students in the past, right? There have been lots of students in the past who have really pulled up, right, their percentiles in the last 1 or 2 months. Right? But as I always say at the end of each mock analysis, please continue taking the mocks and please analyze the mocks carefully. Because now is maybe the time when you have to start thinking about strategy also seriously, right? Strategy also needs to be thought of seriously now, right? Thanks a lot. Thanks.